The glass was still warm when she set it down. Half empty. Lipstick stained. Quiet. I stood in the hallway, holding the little velvet box in my hand, listening to her laugh at something on her phone. It wasn't mine. I wasn't funny anymore. Not to her. She hadn't seen me yet. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. But I forgot my wallet. Funny how something so small can blow up your entire life. I stepped through the door and into a moment I never expected to live through. There she was, curled on the couch, toes tucked under her, face glowing with the light of a message that made her giggle like she was 16 again. I hadn't seen that laugh in months. I missed it. But it wasn't mine. She looked up slowly. I saw the flicker before the smile, fear, guilt, calculation. Then the smile came. Too late. Too forced. Too careful. You're home early, she said, like she hadn't just been caught slipping out of who she pretended to be. I forgot something, I said. The silence was not comfortable. It was strangling. I wanted to ask her then, who was he? How long? Did you even flinch when you erased my name from your joy? But I didn't. Instead, I walked to the table, set down the velvet box, and slid it across the surface like I was offering her a piece of my soul wrapped in ribbon. What's this? She asked. I looked at her like a man watching the sea rise over his front porch, helpless. Tired. Already wet to the knees. Open it, I whispered. She did. Inside was the ring I bought 2 weeks ago. I had planned a whole moment. A trip. A letter. A sunrise. All pointless now. She didn't touch it. She stared at it the way someone stares at a bruise they didn't notice until it started to ache. I can't, she said. 3 words. Simple. Final. She said it gently, as if softness could undo the blade. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because breaking down in front of her would have been the last thing I ever gave to a woman who stopped seeing me as hers. And then I walked. Not to the car. Not to the street. I walked away from the life I had begged to belong to. Forever. I didn't look back when I walked out. I didn't even close the door properly. It stayed cracked open behind me, like an unfinished sentence. The air was still, the street lamp flickered, and my footsteps sounded too loud for a moment like this. My hands were shaking. I didn't know where I was going, and it didn't matter. I just knew I couldn't be in that house another second. That house that smelled like her perfume, that held our wedding photos on the wall, that echoed every lie she told with that gentle, practiced smile. I ended up at the 24-hour diner on Larkin Avenue. I sat at the farthest booth, where the fake leather was torn at the edges, and the table still had coffee rings from someone else's bad night. I didn't order anything. I just sat there, staring out the window like the rain might give me an answer. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket. I didn't check it. I knew it was her. She always texted instead of calling when things got emotional. Easier to control the conversation. Easier to revise your thoughts when someone can't hear your voice cracking. I was about to finally leave when a waiter came by and placed a hot chocolate in front of me. I looked up, confused. He just shrugged and said, "Lady said you looked like you needed something warm." It wasn't her. It was a woman in the corner booth, maybe in her 50s, reading a worn-out paperback. I gave her a weak nod, then stared at the drink. I didn't take a sip. I just let the heat warm my hands while the rest of me stayed cold. Eventually, I walked to my brother's place. He lives on the 2nd floor of a house that smells like stale popcorn and old gym socks. He opened the door, saw my face, and didn't say a word. Just let me in and handed me a blanket. No questions. No judgments. Just a nod that said, "Stay as long as you need." The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and a pounding headache. My phone had 7 missed messages from her. I read them all. They started with, "We need to talk." Then moved to, "I didn't mean it like that. Please, don't make this bigger than it is." And finally, "Can you at least be mature about this?" That last one got me. Mature? I gave her everything I had for 6 years. I let her become my entire world while I became a footnote in hers. I swallowed every quiet insult, every late-night excuse, every skipped dinner, and every hollow kiss, and she wanted to talk about maturity? I didn't respond. Not that day. Not the next. But by day 3, something changed. Not in her texts, but in me. I stopped feeling like I was bleeding. It started to feel more like a burn, raw but healing. And that's when I made the biggest mistake since the moment I said, "I do." I went back to the house. Not to beg. Not to fix things. I told myself I just wanted closure. I had no plan, just a bad idea and a house key that still worked. The moment I stepped inside, the silence punched me in the gut. It wasn't the same house anymore. It smelled like lavender and lemon, her go-to cleaning mix. The dishes were stacked. The laundry was folded, like she was preparing it for someone else. I walked into the bedroom, and everything was too neat, too curated. A hotel version of our marriage. I sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, and that's when I saw it. Her laptop. Still open. Still unlocked. I know I shouldn't have. I wish I hadn't. But I clicked. There, in a folder innocently titled Work Notes, were screenshots. Dozens of them. Some were texts. Some were private social media messages. Conversations between her and someone named T. Flirty. Secretive. Familiar. One message stood out. It read, "He suspects nothing. I told him it was just a team thing. I'll be with you all weekend. Can't wait to finally fall asleep next to you again." Again. That word hit harder than the no she whispered 3 nights earlier. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was a second life. One she curated behind my back while I played the loyal fool in her first one. I didn't smash the laptop. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just closed it, left my key on the counter, and walked out again. Only this time, I didn't stop walking. I didn't walk home. I didn't walk anywhere, really. I just moved forward, street by street, block by block, until my legs started to ache and my mind went numb. By the time I sat down again, I was on a cold bench outside a laundromat 3 neighborhoods away, still clenching my fist like I was trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the weight of all the years I'd spent building something she never planned to keep. I replayed that message in my head, "Can't wait to fall asleep next to you again." Again. I said that word to myself over and over until it felt meaningless. But it wasn't meaningless. It was confirmation. This wasn't just someone she met recently. It was someone who already knew the feel of her breath in bed. Someone who had been where I had once belonged. Someone who had been living in the corners of my marriage long before I noticed the shadows. That night, I didn't go back to my brother's place. I couldn't. I couldn't sit on that lumpy couch pretending to be okay while my insides were unraveling. Instead, I paid for a cheap motel just off the interstate. The kind of place where no one asks questions and the silence is loud enough to crush your chest. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the black screen of the TV, and whispered, "What's wrong with me?" like it was a prayer. I must have fallen asleep because I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. Another message. This one different. "We need to talk. Please. Not about us. It's important. Urgent." It was from her. At first, I thought she was playing some emotional trick, luring me back in with fake concern. But something about the wording stuck in my brain. Not about us. Urgent. I ignored it. Tossed the phone across the bed. Then, 10 minutes later, another message came in. "Please, Daryl. You need to see this. I didn't know how to tell you. You'll hate me more if you find out from someone else." Now that was new. She wasn't denying anything anymore. She was afraid. Of what? That I'd post the messages online? That I'd go to her boss? That I'd destroy her new relationship the way she destroyed our marriage? I didn't know what she meant, but I knew that tone. I'd heard it once before. Years ago, when she hit a parked car and tried to hide it for 2 days before the guilt made her unravel. That same panic clung to those messages now. So, like the idiot I am, I answered. I told her to meet me at a neutral place, Larson's Market parking lot. Open space. Public. No theatrics. She agreed instantly. Said she'd be there in 20 minutes. I got there early. Sat in my car, window cracked just enough to let the wind remind me I was alive. I rehearsed every version of what I might say. Anger. Indifference. Sarcasm. But when her car pulled up, none of those versions came out. I just stood there, arms folded, waiting like someone about to hear the results of a test they already knew the answer to. She stepped out, makeup minimal, hair tied back, looking smaller than usual. Not physically, emotionally. Like the weight of what she'd done was finally pressing down. She didn't walk toward me with her usual confidence. She hesitated. That was rare for her. "I'm not here to beg," she said. "You need to know something. It's about him." Him. The infamous T. The shadow behind her smile. I stayed silent. She glanced around the lot, as if someone might be watching. "He lied to me too," she said quietly. "Tanner. His name is Tanner. He's not who I thought he was." I blinked. "You're saying the guy you cheated on me with also lied to you? Are you seriously asking me to feel sorry for you?" She shook her head quickly. "No. Daryl, I think he used me. All of this, it wasn't just about sex. He knew things. About you." I felt something shift in my gut. "What kind of things?" She hesitated again. Then, as if bracing herself, she handed me a folded envelope from her purse. I found this in his apartment. It had your name on it. Your full name, including your high school nickname. The one I've never told anyone. That nickname haunted me. It was dumb, something the football guys made up, Dusty D. I hadn't heard it since graduation. I took the envelope, hands already cold. Inside was a single printed page. It was a background report. On me. Every job I'd ever applied to. My credit score. My college essays. My medical history. My social media comments from 2008. Even an old message I once sent to a girl named June in freshman year. Just one line. I wish I were good enough. He had it all. Tanner had been watching me for a long time. I looked up at her, throat dry. Why would he do this? Why me? She swallowed hard. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But I think this wasn't just an affair. I think you were the target all along. My knees buckled slightly. I leaned on the hood of her car. For the first time since she said no, I realized this wasn't just a broken marriage. It might have been something darker. Something planned. The sheet of paper crinkled in my hand as I stared down at the words. It wasn't the length of the document that disturbed me, it was the precision. Whoever compiled this knew me in a way even I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. The layout wasn't just factual, it was invasive. Structured. Like someone had followed my life for years, cataloging everything. The kind of information no one had access to unless they went digging way beyond the surface. Way beyond what's legal. When I finally looked back up at Callie, she was biting her lip, nervously shifting from foot to foot like a teenager caught smoking behind the school gym. She was scared, no doubt. But I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her. Not after what she did. Still, this Tanner guy, he had something on both of us. And that changed everything. You need to start explaining. Right now, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Who is he? Really? Where did you meet him? She nodded quickly. Work conference. It was out of state. You remember that trip I took to Denver last fall? That's when it started. He wasn't with our company, he was just there. Said he worked freelance for a bunch of agencies. We had drinks with the team one night, and he was charming. He wasn't even hitting on me at first. He just asked a lot of questions. About my job, about my life. And then one day, it just turned into something else. I narrowed my eyes. How does that become this? I waved the envelope. I don't know. She snapped, then immediately lowered her voice. At first, it felt like I don't know, like someone actually saw me. You've been so distant back then, and he made me feel alive. I thought it was harmless. Then I started noticing things, how he asked weirdly specific questions about you. About your college days, your family, where you kept our financial records. At first, I thought he was just curious. But now I think he was profiling you. I laughed bitterly. So you slept with a guy who was building a file on your husband. Sounds like love. Her face crumpled for a second, but I didn't care. I wasn't trying to be cruel, I was just done cushioning the truth. She had invited this man into our lives, opened the door, and let him sit at the table of everything I once thought was sacred. I swear I didn't know, she whispered. He said he wanted to help me help us. That maybe we'd be better off apart, that you were hiding something from me. He made it sound like he was protecting me from you. That stopped me cold. What? She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Here. She showed me a series of messages from Tanner. Screenshots. Messages I'd never seen. Fabricated emails. Doctored photos of me in places I'd never been. One was a hotel reservation under my name dated during our anniversary weekend, even though I had been with her the entire time. Another was an altered email thread that made it look like I'd been reaching out to old exes behind her back. He told me you were cheating first, she said, voice breaking. That you were manipulating me. That you were going to leave me once your side piece got pregnant. I took a step back, stunned. And you believe that? I didn't want to, she said. But you were so checked out. You barely touched me. You seemed distracted all the time. I thought maybe it was true. I felt like the world tilted slightly beneath me. All those nights I was quiet, all the moments I stayed up late job hunting without telling her, all the ways I held in my stress because I didn't want to burden her, it had been twisted into evidence against me. You didn't even ask, I muttered. She looked ashamed. I know. So what now? I asked after a long pause. Why tell me this now? What changed? She looked at me with eyes that were no longer defiant, no longer defensive. Just broken. He's gone. I blinked. What do you mean? After I confronted him last night, he packed up and disappeared. His apartment's empty. No trace. He even deleted his number. It was like he never existed. My heart sank. What did you say to him? I told him I found the file on you. I told him I'd gone too far and that I was going to tell you everything. He laughed, said it didn't matter anymore, that I was just the means to an end. What end? She hesitated. I think he was after something bigger. Money. Leverage. Something about your father. Now I was fully alert. My father died when I was 17. I know. But Tanner said something weird. He mentioned a trust fund. A sealed record. A lawsuit? I didn't understand it. But he said you'd been hiding your real identity. That you weren't just some substitute teacher living paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't breathe. My legs gave way, and I leaned on the edge of the car. No one knew about that. Not even Callie. I never told anyone. My father had left behind a messy, private court settlement after his business went under, a case that had been buried under non-disclosure agreements and sealed court orders. I got a portion when I turned 25 and used it to pay off debt, then buried the rest in investments. Quiet. Clean. Untouchable. And now this stranger knew. Why would he care about that? I whispered. She looked me dead in the eyes. Because he wasn't just someone I met. He knew who you were before I ever told him. I think this whole thing started before we ever met him. Before Denver. Before the affair. I suddenly felt cold all over. So what are you saying? I think someone sent him. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. I just stared at her like she had grown a second face and both were lying to me. The words were out there now, someone sent him, but they didn't make sense. Who would do something like that? Who even could? For what? A man doesn't go undercover into another man's marriage for sport. You don't seduce someone's wife and orchestrate years of manipulation just because you're bored. This was about something else. Callie leaned against her car, arms folded, face pale in the soft light of the parking lot. For once, she looked like someone who regretted something too big to undo. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she had helped destroy my life, that she invited the poison in and then acted surprised when everything started to rot. But I didn't have the energy anymore. All I had were questions. You think it's connected to my father? I said slowly. You're sure? She nodded. He brought him up twice. Said something about unfinished business. At first, I thought he was trying to provoke you, but now, I don't know. I couldn't believe it. My father had died 2 decades ago. A brilliant man, but a flawed one. He was the kind of entrepreneur who wore charm like a suit and left wreckage behind when things fell apart. When I was a kid, he was a ghost who only showed up when the lights were bright and the cameras were rolling. He ran a tech company that burned fast and died in scandal. Embezzlement, intellectual theft, lawsuits. We went from upper middle class to just barely scraping by in a matter of months. Then, just when it seemed he was about to go to trial, he died in a single car crash on a mountain road. The autopsy said it was a stroke. Some people whispered it was something else, but I never dug into it. I didn't want to. My inheritance, if you could even call it that, came through a quiet settlement between the remaining partners. There were NDAs, sealed documents, and a financial advisor who told me to forget about it and live my life. And I had. Until now. Daryl, Callie said, softer, I think you need to find out who Tanner really was. The idea terrified me. But it also gave me a weird sense of focus, like someone had snapped their fingers in a dark room, and I could suddenly see the outline of the walls around me. I needed answers. I needed names. And there was only one place that could give me even a piece of that. My father's old partner, Julian Cross. Julian had vanished from the media years ago, after the company imploded. Rumor was he'd bought property in northern Vermont and went full recluse, no internet, no phone, just solar panels and a satellite dish. I still had his last known mailing address. I'd kept it in a drawer full of things I never had the courage to deal with, legal letters, old photos, the only handwritten note my dad left me, which simply said, they'll never let you live quietly. Be smarter than I was. I booked the bus that night. No plan, no luggage. I didn't even tell Callie. I just left. The ride was long, foggy, and filled with the kind of anxious silence that makes you question whether your own memories were ever real. I kept looking out the window like I was expecting some ghost to appear in the trees. Tanner's face kept floating into my head. I didn't even know what he really looked like. Everything about him had been filtered through Callie's experience, his charm, his confidence, his seduction. But now, with what I knew, none of that mattered. He wasn't her lover. He was a weapon. By the time I arrived in Vermont, it was nearly dusk. The town where Julian allegedly lived barely qualified as a town, just a collection of old houses, one diner, and a general store that also sold hunting knives and used books. I had to walk the last mile to his property. The road was overgrown, more of a dirt path than a driveway. When I reached the edge of the woods and saw the cabin through the trees, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But then the door opened. Julian Cross hadn't aged well. His gray hair was wiry, his beard unkempt, and his eyes looked like they hadn't truly rested in years. But he recognized me immediately. "Daryl," he said, blinking like he wasn't sure I was real. "You look like your old man. Just less angry." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. He gestured for me to come in. The inside of his cabin was surprisingly clean, full of dusty books, old hard drives, and file boxes labeled in black marker with cryptic titles like Black Sparrow and Montero, 1998. I got straight to the point. "I think someone's targeting me. Someone who knew my dad. He used a fake name, Tanner. Dated my wife. Manipulated her. Collected data on me. Told her I was hiding something. Mentioned a trust. A sealed case. You were there. You know what happened. Tell me what they're trying to find." Julian sat down slowly, like the weight of my words aged him 10 years and 10 seconds. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a folder, and set it on the table between us. "You really want to know what your father buried?" he asked. I didn't come all this way for nothing. He opened the folder. Inside was a photo of a young man in a suit, handsome, tan, confident. He looked vaguely familiar. I realized after a few seconds that it was the same man I'd seen in the blurry photo Callie showed me. "That's not Tanner," Julian said. "Who is it?" Julian exhaled. "His real name is Lane Mercer. And your father ruined his family." I stared at the photo like it was an optical illusion. The man looking back at me had a politician's smile, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes that held the kind of darkness you only notice after you've already trusted him. So this was him, Lane Mercer. The man who dismantled my marriage with a whisper and a grin. The man who made my wife believe I was the liar, the cheater. The man who studied me, dissected my life, then used it like a scalpel to bleed me out without ever touching me. "Your father didn't just ruin Lane's family," Julian said, his voice lower now. "He destroyed them. Publicly. Purposefully." I couldn't look away from the photo. I've never heard of this guy. How does he even tie into our family? Why me? Julian reached for a file box behind him, opened it, and pulled out a manila envelope with handwriting I recognized instantly, my dad's. That same sharp, angled scrawl he used when signing checks or writing warnings in the margins of legal documents. Julian slid it across the table and gestured for me to open it. Inside were dozens of printed emails and legal memos. Clippings from business news columns. Court filings. Lawsuit transcripts. At the center of all of it was a name I didn't expect to see, Arthur Mercer, Lane's father. "He and your dad were partners once," Julian explained. "Not in the official way. It was a handshake deal, one of those off-the-books kind of arrangements. Arthur had the technical genius. Your dad had the charm, the media instinct, the financial backing. Together, they developed a piece of encryption software way ahead of its time. A prototype. It would have changed the cybersecurity world. But just before they could patent it together, your dad filed solo and claimed Arthur never had a legal stake. Buried him in red tape. Won the case. Got full rights. Arthur lost everything. Went bankrupt. Eventually had a breakdown. I felt a chill creep down my spine. So Lane grew up watching his dad fall apart." Julian nodded grimly. "Worse. Arthur Mercer ended up in a state-run facility. Couldn't take care of himself. Lane was 16. No money, no inheritance, no family name left to stand on. And your father? He cashed out 2 years later and bought a condo in Monaco." I sat back, stunned. I knew my dad wasn't a saint, but this was cruelty dressed up as business. He never told me about this. Never mentioned the Mercers. Not once. Julian leaned forward. "Lane disappeared from the public radar after college. Changed his name. Went dark. I always wondered if he'd come back for blood. Why didn't you say something sooner?" I asked. "Because I thought it was over. Your dad was gone. Arthur was a ghost. And you were just a kid back then. You didn't even know what was happening." "But Lane didn't forget," I said quietly. "No," Julian said. He waited. And now it made sense. All of it. Why Tanner, Lane, had sought out Callie. Why he had woven himself into her life, manipulated her, distorted her perception of me. Why he had built a dossier on me, down to the teenage message I sent to some girl in a computer lab. He hadn't just wanted revenge. He wanted humiliation, implosion, to make me suffer in the same way his father did. Powerless, discarded, left to rot in the ruins of a life someone else had the power to break. Do you know where he is? I asked. Julian shook his head. He's careful, but he left traces. I tracked one of the shell companies he used to rent an apartment in D.C. That lease ended the same week your wife confronted him. He's already gone, but I can try to find him. I didn't hesitate. Do it. Julian nodded and pulled out a flash drive. Take this. It has everything I've collected. Maybe it'll help you understand the full scope. As I slipped the drive into my pocket, a strange calm settled over me. The shock had dulled. The sadness had calcified. I no longer felt like the helpless man sitting in the corner of his own life. I felt something else rising, clarity. But the moment I stepped outside Julian's cabin and turned on my phone, all of that clarity cracked. 12 missed calls from Callie. One voicemail. I hesitated, then played it. Her voice was frantic. Panicked. Daryl, please call me back. I think someone's been in the house. The door was open when I got home. Your laptop's gone. The drawer with the tax stuff is empty. I don't know what's happening. Please come. I'm scared. I broke into a run. By the time I made it back to the city, the sky had turned a color I can only describe as bruised. Thick clouds hung heavy above the skyline like they were trying to smother the sun. I didn't take a cab. I didn't wait for a ride. I ran. From the train station to the block we used to call home. My chest burning, legs shaking, thoughts pounding. Not because I was worried about the furniture or some tax documents. It was the pattern. Lane had already taken pieces of my past, poisoned my present. And now, he was in my future. Stealing forward. Pulling strings. When I turned onto our street, I saw Callie pacing outside. Her hair was tied back like she hadn't slept, and her fingers trembled as she pointed at the front door. It was cracked open. A sliver of absence where something should have been secure. That door had been the threshold to our life. The place I once carried her through with shaking arms on our wedding night. Now it hung crooked, helpless. We didn't speak. I stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet. Not trashed. Not ransacked. That was worse. It meant whoever had been here knew exactly what they were looking for. And they found it. My desk drawer, the one I used for important things, was empty. Bank statements. Password notebooks. Retirement accounts. Even the flash drive I had backed up from Julian's cabin, gone. I opened the closet. The fire-safe box with our passports and marriage license had been ripped open and left like an empty shell. And then I saw something that made my throat close. A photo on the hallway wall, one of the last few from before everything went bad, was missing. But not randomly. It wasn't some thief who didn't want their face caught in the frame. No, this was intentional. The space where the photo had hung was wiped clean, while the surrounding wall had that faint rectangular shadow of time. It was a message. A signature. I was here. I took what matters. I turned to Callie. Did you touch anything? She shook her head. Just the door handle. I called you right away. I need to see the cameras. We don't have cameras, she said quietly. Yes, we do. The neighbor across the street, Victor. He's got the doorbell cam that catches half the front yard. I'm going over. I didn't wait for her to follow. I bolted across the street, banged on the door like a man on fire. Victor answered with a coffee mug in one hand and surprise in his eyes. Daryl? You okay? Need to see your camera feed. Now. He didn't ask questions. He just stepped aside. Within minutes, we were watching grainy footage of our driveway. Most of it was uneventful, delivery trucks, someone walking their dog. But then at 3:17 a.m., a dark SUV pulled up. Not too flashy, not beat up either. A man got out wearing a ball cap and gloves. He moved with purpose. Knew exactly where the door lock sensor was. Didn't force it, just tapped a device, and the door clicked open. He was inside for 13 minutes. No panic. No rush. When he came out, he wasn't carrying bags or boxes. Just a briefcase. I leaned in. Can you zoom? Victor tried. The face never fully showed. But just before the man slid into the car, he paused. He looked up at the camera, not directly, but close. It was him. I didn't need a clear face. I recognized that subtle arrogance, that posture, the way he moved like he owned the moment. Lane Mercer had come into my home while I was halfway across the state, and he took what he needed to end the game. Victor copied the footage to a thumb drive for me. I took it, thanked him, and left. Callie was still in the living room, staring at the hole where the photo used to be. Why that one? She asked as I walked back in. Why take that one? I didn't answer. Because I already knew. It was the photo of us in Vermont. The trip I surprised her with a year after we got married. The one weekend we were truly happy. That photo was never online, never backed up. It was a moment we'd framed because it meant something. And now Lane had it. Not to remember us. To erase us. To twist even the good memories into tools. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop, my backup laptop. The old one I used before the wedding. It was dusty and slow, but it still had something Lane probably didn't know existed. A folder titled Archive. Inside were bank documents I had scanned when I first received the trust fund. Communications with the financial advisory firm. One of the documents included a list of sealed beneficiaries, a clause in my father's settlement. I'd never looked closely at it. Now, I did. And my stomach dropped. One of the names was Elaine Mercer. Lane's mother. Suddenly everything clicked into place. The sealed fund wasn't just for me. My father had known he destroyed a family. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe court-ordered. Whatever the reason, he had arranged for Lane's mother to receive payouts. Quietly, privately, protected by non-disclosure and hidden in the financial undergrowth of corporate red tape. But Lane must have found out. And if he did, then he also knew what I had never seen, that the final clause in the fund required my authorization to release the remaining amount. Meaning Lane couldn't touch it unless I signed off. I was the gatekeeper. And now I understood what the game had always been. Not just ruin. Not just humiliation. This was leverage. Manipulation. He didn't want me destroyed. He wanted me desperate. So low I'd do anything. Sign anything. I stood up fast. Callie looked startled. "Where are you going?" "To end this," I said. "Before he does." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I just sat in my car outside the house, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes locked on the horizon as the night slowly peeled back into morning. I thought about everything. How I ended up here. How a stranger walked into my life like a friend. How the woman I loved let herself become the weapon that almost destroyed me. But most of all, I thought about the moment my father tried to warn me. They'll never let you live quietly. Be smarter than I was. He wasn't talking about competitors or markets or shareholders. He was talking about guilt. And maybe, in his own broken way, he was trying to atone. That trust fund? It wasn't just money. It was a lifeline. A last-ditch apology to the people he'd hurt. People like Elaine Mercer. And people like me, his son, who had to carry the shame he never publicly shouldered. I spent the next day calling every contact Julian had ever worked with. Every legal tie to the fund. Every digital thread. I traced the last known IP address Lane had used to download the files he'd stolen from my house. Then I traced the access point he used to log in again. The geolocation hid in Maryland, a rural town just outside of Rockville. I didn't go alone. I called Julian, told him what I found, and he met me halfway. By late afternoon, we stood outside a rundown property hidden behind a tall gate and hedges. The kind of place you rent when you don't want to be seen. We didn't knock. Julian knew someone who could get a warrant to force access to the premises through a digital fraud clause connected to the theft of my laptop. It was quiet. Lane was gone. But we found what we needed: files, drives, a detailed plan, notes on me, on Callie, on my father, even notes on Julian. The most chilling part? He had copies of the trust fund documents annotated, marked in red pen. He has to be the one to authorize it. Break him. Break him. That was the whole point. I was never the target because of who I was. I was the target because of who I wasn't. I wasn't my father. I wasn't a man who ruined lives for profit. I wasn't someone who buried guilt under bank accounts and lies. And that, ironically, is what saved me. I didn't sign away my values. I didn't destroy someone to protect myself. I walked away. 3 days later, I submitted everything to the proper authorities. Julian helped me draft a full legal report. We protected what was left of the fund. I even filed for it to be restructured, 50% to be released to a foundation in Elaine Mercer's name. Publicly. Transparently. And the rest? I donated it. It was the only way to end the cycle. Callie and I met once more after that. At a small cafe near the lake, far from our old neighborhood. She looked older, not in a tired way, but in a reflective one. She apologized again. Sincerely. I told her I forgave her. Not because I forgot, but because I refused to carry the bitterness any longer. She cried. I didn't. We said goodbye like two people who once loved each other deeply and now understood that love can't survive on its own. It needs honesty, safety, loyalty. We hadn't given each other that. Not when it mattered most. Weeks passed. Then months. I moved to a smaller town. Found work again, Nothing glamorous. Just honest. I took up photography on the weekends. Something about capturing moments that couldn't be faked felt healing. Real. One afternoon, I found myself walking through a street fair and stopped to watch a little boy trying to fly a paper kite that kept crashing. His dad knelt beside him, adjusted the frame, whispered something, and they tried again. The kite soared. I smiled. It hurt. A little. But it felt good too. Sometimes, the most powerful moment in your life isn't the one where you fight back, or scream, or burn it all down. Sometimes, it's when you walk away, with nothing but your name, and the quiet conviction that you didn't become the worst part of your story. Because I didn't. I'm not broken. I'm just beginning again.